Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to report the electoral and party politics in the post-war period. I am Rica May Mantalaba and I am with Miss Angeli Barimbad and we are the reporters. But before that, I will read first the objectives. The first objective is to discuss the Philippines' involvement in the Second World War and ensuring post-war reconstruction, and the second is to discuss the parties that emerged and competed against each other during the period. The first topic will be the party politics during World War II interregnum. Manuel L. Quezon's leadership before the war. During the outbreak of the war, it overshadowed both constitutional amendments of 1940 and the re-election of Manuel Quezon and Osmeña in November 1941. At that time, Manuel L. Quezon is the Commonwealth President and Sergio Osmeña is the Vice President. Months before the war, Quezon successfully consolidated both the Nationalist Party and Commonwealth government under his sole authority, and his party had almost complete dominion over the legislature. At the start of the war, Commonwealth went into exile in the U.S. for the duration of the war. Instead na remain si Quezon sa Filipino people and faced the difficult choice of collaborating with the Japanese, mas gipili niya na muside sa American. After that, he appointed Chief Justice Jose Abad Santos as acting president of the government of the Commonwealth Government of the Philippines, and Manuel Rojas was also appointed as his secretary. At that time, Filipinos were called as collaborators. Actually, there are two kinds of collaborators. The first collaborators are the Filipinos, and the second one are those Commonwealth-era leaders that cooperated and remained under the Japanese control. According to Abonales and Amoroso, they did it so for programmatic reasons. First is that the Americans had abandoned them, and second is in compliance with Quezon's directive to work with the invaders to prevent political and social breakdown. By December 1942, the Japanese military authorities, or the JMA, announced voluntary dissolution of all political parties as vestiges of American power and authority in the Philippines. Afterwards, they decided to create an organization, and that is the Kalibapi, which stands for Kapisanan sa Paglilingkod sa Bagong Pilipinas. Kalibapi is a non-political service organization in the aid of country's reconstruction efforts, and it was thought that this association is not for Filipinos, but to essentially serve the Japanese, the interest of Japanese, and was seen as an instrumental in securing some degree of popular support for the GMA, or for the Japanese military authorities. By mid-1943, Kalibapi claimed to have had a registered membership of 3.6 million Filipinos, which is 20% of the country's population that time. Kalibapi is not considered as political parties kaya wala man sila nag-compete or nangumpanya during election. But ang Kalibapi is considered as party to the extent that its members vied for public service. The reason for this is na misunderstood ang Kalibapi sa kadaghanan as requirements for employment in government. During the war, the Communist Party of the Philippines, or the CPP, continued the resistance against the Japanese. They established the People's Army against Japan, or Hukbong Bayan laban sa Hapon, or known as the Hukbalahap, or Huk for short. Not all Huks were communist, but many of them were poor peasants. Japanese then set about planning for eventual declaration of independence in the country, perhaps in an effort to convince the people of its noble intentions. The Preparatory Commission for Independence was established with Jose Laurel as president and inaugurated the independence of the country on October 14, 1943. Jose P. Laurel presidency before was sponsored by the Japanese Constitution. After Laurel won the election, the Japanese seen Laurel as belligerent, meaning Laurel was seen as violent or Laurel's agenda is not in line with their wartime agenda. So, the Japanese military authorities or the JMA created a new organization named as Kalipunan ng Makabayan ng mga Pilipino or Makapili under the leadership of Benigno Ramos. This organization was used by the Japanese as a hedge against Laurel and the Republican government. After it had gone into exile in the US, the Commonwealth government under Quezon was faced with the problem of who would constitutionally succeed his term. So in early 1943, Quezon wrote President Roosevelt so that he may continue the Commonwealth government without being elected for the duration of the war. After the appeal was made, the U.S. Congress passed a joint resolution that effectively allowed Quezon to continue his term. Unfortunately, he died after the appeal was made. Quezon died of a chronic pulmonary disease and Osmeña assumed the presidency. The next topic is about the immediate post-war party politics. With the end of the war and the return of the American sovereignty over the archipelago, both Kalibapi and Makapili, the organizations created by the Japanese military authority, were disbanded. Then the American imposed policy at that time that did not allow collaborators to occupy positions in the government. Quezon stated that those collaborators during the Japanese War are only doing what they think is their duty, and they are not traitors. They are just the victims of the adverse fortunes of the war and they have no choice. At that time, conflict arose between Manuel Rojas and Sergio Osmeña. As you can remember from the previous topic, Osmeña assumed the position of president of the Commonwealth government after Quezon died and Manuel Rojas as the Senate President and the Secretary of Chief Justice Jose Abad Santos, the appointed President of Commonwealth Government of Manuel Quezon. There was an indication that Rojas would run for presidency in April 1946, the country's first post-war period and last under Commonwealth government. They attempt to reconcile the two factions or conflict within the parties in a way that Quezon will accept the vice presidency. And upon his election, si Rojas came to resign as president 6 months into his term, but the proposal was eventually rejected by Rojas. And Rojas reasoned nga mudagan siya pagka president para ma-defend niya ang side nga ingnan sila as traitors, which is part man si Rojas sa collaborators under sa Commonwealth government kay gi-appoint man sila ni Quezon during the war. So Rojas prepared to disengage from the Nationalist Party. According to him, if such unity is to be put before the welfare of the country, I shall break that unity and, if necessary, destroy the Nationalista Party. Afterwards, ipatawag niya ang mga nationalistas nga mo-join sa liberal wing with Elpidio Carino nominated for the vice presidency and him as vice presidency. Meanwhile, ang remaining Osmeña wing of Nationalista Party held its own convention in which Osmeña and Eulogia Rodriguez were nominated for the presidency and vice presidency respectively. The Osmeña camp called those Filipinos who collaborated with the Japanese authorities as traitors were upon Rojas declared that he was simply doing what any patriotic Filipino would do in the interest of the people. The results of the April 23, 1946 election was Rojas won and Quirino won also as the vice president. So, nadaog sa liberal wing ang 1946 elections. Eventually, Rojas closed the collaboration issue, which is ang Osmeña Camp Code collaborators, appeal na si Rojas as traitors by issuing a presidential proclamation in January 1948, granting full and complete amnesty or official pardon to all persons accused of any offense against the national security for acts allegedly committed to give aid and comfort to the enemy during the last war. Next topic is the post-independence electoral and party politics. At this point, liberals were already divided between the Quirinistas or loyal to Quirino and Avelinistas loyal to Jose Avellino, the Senate President at that time and chairman of Liberal Party. Not surprisingly, main point sa ilang conflict kay personal rivalry with each group accusing the other of backstabbing and treachery. In 1949, they created the first party, which is the Liberal Party under Quirino and Fernando Lopez for vice presidency. And on the other hand, the Avellino wing was Jose Avellino with Vicente Francisco as his running mate. Meanwhile, ang sa nasyonalista ang ilang pambato kay si Jose Laurel as president with Associate Justice Manuel Briones as vice president. But still, si Quirino gihapon ang nidaog and proved the advantage of the incumbent. The 1949 was signaled the beginning of dirty and dirty and the bloodiest electoral politics as described by George Malcolm in all Philippine history. Young also observed that it was somewhat a national disgrace, as was reported in many municipalities, more voters than the people of the entire population. In Negros Occidental, for instance, the dead outvoted the living. It was unbelievable that somebody who died 15 years ago or 15 years before the election had voted the straight QLP or the Carino Liberal Party ticket. Therefore, it was satirically alleged that the ghosts and even monkeys and bees were also allowed to vote in certain provinces, not to say of the flying voters, an anomaly committed by both the liberals and nationalista. In Cavite, as was recorded, the polling places for the, the polling places closed as early as 9 o'clock in the morning of the election day, since those in authority had already already cast the ballots in behalf of the voters. In in Cebu, it was the civilian guards and special policemen employed by the authorities who did all the voting and counting of the ballots. Anyone who dares to question the procedures would be manhandled and if not, be killed. That's all for my report and Miss Angeli Barimbad will continue the discussion.
Hey everyone, my name is Angeli D. Barimbad, and this is the part of my report about Magsaysay, the Rising Star. In 1950, Ramon Magsaysay, a World War II guerrilla, took his oath of office as Secretary of Defense. On October 18, 1950, he was able to break the backbone of the hooks with the capture of communists. Hooks it means hukbong-bayan laban sa mga Hapon. On February 28, 1953, Magsaysay resigned as a Secretary of National Defense and Magsaysay took his oath as a member of the National Party list with his running mate, Carlos Garcia. In 1953 elections, the Nationalist Party had captured Magsaysay won resoundingly against Carino. On March 17, 1957, Magsaysay died in a plane crash. So, ang hukbong bayan laban sa Hapon is better known by the acronym Huk Balahap na ang ilahang leader ay si Luis Tarok noong February 1950 na, na ay nagtatag ng People's Liberation Army at nananawagan para sa pagpapabagsak ng pamahalaan. Pagkatapos ay isinagawa ni Magsaysay hanggang 1953 ang isa sa pinakamatagumpay na kampanyang anti-guerrilla sa modernong kasaysayan. So napagtanto ni Magsaysay hindi maitatag ang hukbong kung walang suporta ng karamihan. So sinikap niyang makuha ang tiwala ng mga magsasaka sa pamamagitan ng pag-alok ng lupa at kasangkapan sa mga pumunta sa panig ng gobyerno at sa pamamagitan ng pag-iit na tratuhin ng hukbo ang mga tao ng may galang. Bagamat isang liberal si Magsaysay, so nagtagumpay siyang sinuportahan ng Nationalista Party para sa pagkapangulo laban kay Quirino noong 1953 na halalan, na nanalo sa suporta ni Carlos P. Romulo na nag-organisa ng isang katlong partido. Nangako si Magsaysay ng reforma sa bawat bahagi ng buhay ng Pilipinas. Ngunit nabigo siya sa kanyang pagsisikap ng isang konserbatibong kongreso na kumakatawan sa interes ng mayayaman. Sa patakarang pinalabas ay si Magsaysay ay nanatiling malapit na kaibigan na taga-suporta ng US at isang tinig na tagapagsalita laban sa komunis noong Cold War. Ginawa niya miyembro ang Pilipinas ng South Asia Treaty Organization noong September 8, 1954, bago matapos ang kanyang termino bilang Pangulo. So, namatay si Magsaysay sa isang pagbagsak ng eroplano. Then, post-Magsaysay electoral politics. A group of Magsaysay formed Progressive Party of the Philippines, particularly former Customs Commissioner Manuel Manahan and former Labor Secretary Eleuterio Adibuso. In 1961 elections, Garcia became a candidate of president of the Nacionalistas while Macapagal ran as a president of the Liberal Party. Also, there was one independent presidential candidate, Rogelio de la Rosa. In 1963, things were nothing going well between Macapagal and Vice President Manuel Palais. Then, the rise of Marcos. The preparation of elections for 1965, Liberal Party chose to field Macapagal again for president. The Nacionalistas, on the other hand, fielded Marcos and Speaker pro tempore Fernando Lopez as president and vice president. Marcos, the son of a politician, he practiced as a trial lawyer before serving under Manuel Rojas, the first president of the independent Philippines. He was himself elected president in 1966. Sa unang termino ni Marcos kay umunlad ang agriculture, industriya at edukasyon, pero katong 1972 ipinataw niya ang batas militar, and his later years in power were noted for rampant government corruption, economic stagnation, political repression, and steady growth of the communist insurgency. So after public outcry, kasunod ng sigaw ng mga publiko sa pagpatay sa pinuno ng oposisyon na si Benigno Aquino. At sa tila mapanlinlang na eleksyon, tagumpay na sa elections na si Marcos laban sa asawa na si Corazon Aquino. So Marcos was forced into exile in Hawaii, US. Then next is continuity and pre-martial law, electoral and party politics. So, Philippine political parties retain their essential feature as election-oriented machines composed largely of local-based clans and alliances to families for mutual assistance and winning, exploiting, and retention of public offices. So, Philippine politics is that two major parties are quite identical with respect to the social, occupational, and regional sources of their support as well as to their policies. This only proves that despite the war, there is no discontinuity between pre-war and post-war electoral and party politics. Marcos to be re-elected in 1965 and to eventually make him the single strongest politician in the country by 1972. Philippine political parties do not engage in year-round social, athletic, and cultural activities designed to maintain the loyalty of their supporters. Parties make little attempts to indoctrinate anyone and organize no public gatherings except on election time when innocuous campaign rallies are held. So Liam further makes a number of observations about the state of pre-martial law electoral and party politics. So Philippine democracy in the post-independence period did not manifest much different from previous period under Americans.
That's all for our report. Hope you learned something. Thank you and God bless.